in partnership with CommSec.
And a very good morning, Tom Piotrowski over at CommSec. How are we looking this morning, Tom?
Pete, it's going to be quite a constructive start for the local session this morning. The futures are pointing to an improvement of a little over 0.75%. So a nice turnaround from that loss of 0.25% yesterday. It was an interesting session as far as Northern Hemisphere markets were concerned. There was initial concern that the trade tensions were beginning to escalate once again. That saw US markets at their lowest ebb, down by the better part of 1%. But what was quite remarkable, Pete, was the turnaround. So you saw the S&P 500 erase all of those declines and finish with a gain of 0.33%. So that's part of the reason why we can anticipate a better start today, that turnaround in sentiment. Technology stocks were leading the charge higher for Wall Street, but the gain was only 0.75%. Bearing in mind that the S&P 500 has had its best month since November of 23 last month. So it was good to see ultimately that positive outcome. There was some weaker manufacturing numbers in the US that added to the conversation around lower rates sooner rather than later. But then you also saw car makers under pressure because of the imposition of or doubling of tariffs on steel and aluminium into the United States. So car makers were generally under pressure as a theme. So General Motors and Ford, for example, in the US were down in the order of around 4%. There have been some big moves higher for commodity prices. You've seen the US dollar fall away close to its lowest levels this year, and that's put upward pressure on commodity prices. So gold up by the most part of 3%, oil up by the better part of 4%. There are wildfires in Canada, Pete, which are threatening supplies out of that region, so that's contributing to that. One of the big events today will be the release of the RBA minutes from last week's policy setting meeting, and there'll be a lot of attention, Pete, paid to the conversation around whether or not the RBA should cut rates by 0.5%. That was a feature of last week that included that dovish pivot, which has had the market excited. The Aussie dollar is trading close to 65 US cents because of that weakness in the greenback.
Yeah, all righty. Tom Piotrowski, thank you.